Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to a lot of unique and interesting characters from the comedy world that will help chase the comedy journey and do it in your own unique way. Now, today's guest is a man who's been in comedy for over a decade, and a man who he's been in 50 years in comedy.
It's less.
Oh, it's 20 years around that. And he's not only is he a great comic that's been going for ages, but he is someone that is so skilled with photography that he can turn a Kennedy geese into a swan. Please welcome the brilliant Steve Best.
Hey, thank you. It's lovely. What a great introduction. Clapping over my. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Nice to be here.
Did you like the introduction?
It was a good introduction. I'm impressed. You've had practice. How many podcasts have you done now? You've done quite a few though, haven't you?
So I've got about, I think, around 174 that are uploaded, but I've got about, if I look at some of the ones that I've deleted that I'm not happy with as well, and that haven't, because in the early days when you start something, it goes all over the place and sometimes recordings go funny.
Yeah.
I'll probably say about 15 or 20 more. So I've probably done nearly 200.
Over how long have you been going for? A couple of years?
So I've been doing it since, I think about since the pandemic hit.
Okay.
So yeah, I've started it, and someone, people recommended I do the podcast. I don't know why, but they said that to me when I talked about comedy or entertainment. And so I thought, why not during the pandemic? Because I came from Golia school, I had nothing else better to do, and I started from there.
You're from Golia? Is that how you started? That's kind of clowny kind of stuff.
No, I've been doing comedy for quite a while, but I tried to do jokes and like do it how a lot of other comics do it. But a lot of the times when I get the laughs, it's not through a smart, clever line or this and that. It's just that I get laughs for the persona or something stupid that I've done on stage. So people recommended that I do clowning. And that's why I went to, first I did a clowning course in McBarnfather. And then I decided to do clowning in Golia.
That's interesting because my people used to, when I did more stuff on stage, people thought I was from the clowning tradition because my stuff is a lot of kind of mannerisms and speed and mucking around and props and quite clowny. So people thought I'd studied clowning, which I haven't, or that I'd come from the street entertainment, being on the street doing kind of Covent Garden stuff. But it's not. Yeah, it's quite weird. I never did that. But anyway, yeah, interesting.
So you're a comic that's sort of, you'd say that you're a comic that's more sort of prop based, and you also get laughs more for your persona and doing funny things on stage.
Kind of, but I mean, I started out in magic actually. I was Young Magician of the Year finalist a long time ago, and did the final at the Polka Theatre in Wimbledon. And I was obsessed with magic. That was my big thing. I was really into magic, and which I do in the act a little bit still, but it's more kind of comedy, props, and magic. And then I got so obsessed. I get obsessed with things quite quickly. So the guitar, I studied the guitar like 8 hours a day. I used to get up and do my scale at 6 a.m. and do my scales, and then do the whole day practicing the guitar. So I was always into props. So, and then I kind of write jokes as well. So a lot of little one-liners. Lots of props, bit of music, bit of magic, yeah. So it wasn't. I was never defined as the. It's more of a kind of what's it called when they. What's the act called? It's not really a pure stand-up. People would say. But that's another kind of topic really, where people get a bit upset if you're not called a stand-up.
Yeah.
But it was stand-up still. But anyway, yeah. It's more of a speciality act, I suppose.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that in comedy. There's a hell of a lot of that.
Well, less so. I think when I started, there was loads of weird and wonderful acts, and more kind of cabaret kind of style of things, jugglers, and there's less. It's more stand up now than it's ever been. I think there's less kind of weird and wonderful stuff going on.
I've got a little thing to. I want to see what your thoughts are on this. But do you know? You obviously know that the balloon swallow trick, and I did that at one gig, and it went
Hang on, before
terribly
you
wrong.
do that, I invented that, and
Oh,
people will might go against me, but I invented that before I started in the business. It's my. I didn't actually put it on the market. Someone in America did it a different way to me. It was me and my twin brother. We were in Spain when I was traveling around when I was 20 or something like that. And I used to do kids entertainment like balloon models and all this stuff. And
oh.
it's actually my brother who did it. It's my twin brother. We were in a bar, in a flamenco bar, and he got this balloon and he started swallowing it. And then I put it into my act 30 years ago when I first started. And it was stolen so many times after I did about 10 years. And there's a guy I think who I don't know what the book's called, it's something like called Geek Magic. And I am associated with starting it, that one, that balloon swallow. But anyway, what's your story? It's mine.
Oh, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
brilliant, mate.
yeah.
I so I did that and I failed doing it. Uh, and it got a huge bunch of laughs, and I completely killed during that gig. And then Andy Zapp went to me and said, that trick was done by yourself and what's the name? Becky Fury."
Becky Fury, really? So she mostly didn't know I'd start because it's what's really weird in stand-up comedy, you don't take people's jokes. If someone's done that joke before, you wouldn't do it. In magic, it's people just do the trick because they're sold on the market as magic tricks. So you can do them. There's no reason why you can't do them. When I started out, I did this thing called the Rocky Raccoon, which is a looks like a raccoon, but it's got a spring in it and you can make it move. So it looks like a real animal. And David Williamson, who's a magician, he was doing a routine and I wanted to do a routine and I didn't want to copy his. But I had little bits from his routine, but then I made up some my own things in it. And I always did that with magic. If I saw something and I thought that's great, I'd have to put my own slant on it, my own thing on it. Otherwise, you're just buying a trick and doing it exactly the same. But in comedy, you're not allowed to do that, which is fair enough. You've got to write your own stuff. But magic, you can't invent stuff. But I think with the balloon swallow, it looked like a bit of business. It wasn't quite a magic trick, although to the audience, it's amazing, isn't it? You're swallowing a balloon. And I mean, I added the bit later on where I swallow the balloon, and when I do the Elvis routine, where I pull out handkerchiefs from my bum, the balloon the balloon is on the end of that. So in actual fact, there is an ending to that. So I eat the balloon, at the beginning of the act, and at the end of the act, I do a routine where I swallow handkerchiefs, and then as an Elvis thing, and I open up my butt, and I pull out the handkerchiefs from my butt, but there's also the balloon at the end of that, so it looks great. It's really good. So people think there's a callback to that. So anyway, I can't remember what you're saying. So go say. So you mucked up your bit of it.
No, but yeah, it got huge laughs, and then effectively, Andy Zapp said, "Oh, like mentioned that you guys both did it, and there may be a bit of yeah." I thought I'd bring it up and have a chat and see about it because it was something I didn't know that you guys had done the trick because I saw it as you said that trick's being used so many times that you
Yeah.
think it's just something that you can take and just use in your own act, and that's
Well, it's interesting. Is it like heckler put down lines? They seem they've come from somewhere, but yet they are still written stuff, and so people tend to use those but you wouldn't take someone else's joke. So I'm okay because I feel that it's kind of a magic trick that's the way it goes. I was a bit peeved at the beginning, like years ago, when I saw someone else do it, and I thought, I do that, I do that on the circuit, and because you didn't know that, which is fine, you just thought it was a trick. But when you work with other comedians years ago and they know I did that and they started doing it, you think, well, that you wouldn't do that to comedy. Why are you doing it to my? But then they're coming from the magic world, as I said, thinking, well, it might have been bought and it's just one of those things. So it's a tough one. But I mean, there was a recent one where I found out that Joe Pasquale stole my Elvis routine, and that I got really pissed off with because he apparently did it on tour, and then people who might see me at a club think that I've stolen it off him. And there was someone else from the Magic Circle actually, who put it on YouTube and did the Elvis routine, word for word or visual by visual that I did, and then said, "Oh, this is a tribute to Joe Pasquale." So he was kind of saying, "I'm doing this act because I think Joe Pasquale does it so well. This is my tribute to Joe Pasquale." You think, hang on a second, it's mine. I'm not even mentioned in this. You're stealing it from Joe Pasquale, who stole it from me, and then
Mm.
attributing it to something. It's just like that. That's when I got really annoyed.
There's such a big thing with this because I know there were Darius Davies. He had an incident with
Yeah,
Kay Kurd, and I think I mentioned I saw a Cura article by what's his face, Leo Kearse as well, saying that in comedy that it's only the main joke thievery comes up at the bottom or at the very top of the circuit, and I think that that's from what I
yes,
see,
I
I think
think I
that's
yes, as you're
that's true.
growing into the circuit, you're made really aware that that is not the right thing. That you can't do that. I mean, I know of another story of a friend who that happened to them who's kind of well known on the circuit, and the problem is also you hear stories of people going on cruise ships. A lot of comedians doing cruise ships, and it seems because that's quite a mainstream kind of area to do stuff. Then they feel, well, they're on on the open seas. I'm just gonna, because you have to do a lot of material. You sometimes have to do 3 30-minute sets on there, and a lot of people to do really strong or 3 45-minute sets, which is quite a long time to do. So they feel, well, they're on the boat, I can just do some stuff that I think is really good, that someone else's, no one will find out. Or you do a tour in Australia and no one's going to really find out. But it's a small world really, and people do find out. And I'm surprised. And also you've got people like Pasquale on the mainstream circuit, who I think have writers who go out to some of the comedy clubs and just steal stuff and then go to him and say, "Look, I've written this for you." So he might be a bit innocent about it, although he's not, because I know he saw me do on I did actually did it on television before he did. He knew I did it. So anyway, so that's enough. But yes, what's your point?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit. You can let me know if you want to get rid of this bit or whatever. But it's because it's going a bit of dark territory. But I'm. The point is because I've heard differing views on it. My opinion is what you said there in terms of like jokes or the way you do comedy can be taken. I spoke to some acts like the great Lynn Ruth Miller and some other comedians who say that you make your jokes funny, you make this funny, but I don't know if that's true because I see quite a few examples of where that's not true, where someone can take, as you said, someone's idea and nick
Yeah,
it.
no, I think the problem is you can't copyright jokes. I mean, I tried to, even my routine. I actually put an invoice into him for some money to pay for the joke, because people pay for jokes to be written for them. So I said, well, you've taken that, you pay me for it. I can't do anything about it now. You've used it. Here's an invoice, and he just obviously didn't pay it. But I think you can be a brilliant performer and not such a good writer, but on our circuit, you've got to write your own stuff. That's the whole point of it. And on the older mainstream circuit, people would confer in the dressing room. What joke have you done? What joke have you done? And they're great joke tellers. They're very good at telling jokes, but none of them have kind of written anything. So they're just working out who's done what on the bill, and they go and do their jokes. So that was kind of very much accepted on that circuit, but it's not accepted on the circuit. And I don't think there's any room for someone taking the joke without asking them or saying, "Can I pay you for this?" And then I'll do it because I'm a bigger comedian now. I need material to do on television. There's no excuse for someone going on television and using someone else's material word for word. I mean, there's been examples. I've done it with Sean Mio where I've written a joke. I took my orgasm. I took my orgasm to Christie's. Turns out it's fake. Something like, I can't remember what the joke was. I haven't done it for so long. But Sean Mio does something very, very similar. He went to an art gallery and there's a picture called The Orgasm, and it turned out it was fake. I mean, it's a joke that can easily be written by two people without conferring, and I think that's fine. But when it's a routine that's kind of word for word, and you think that's been stolen, then there's no excuse for that. Do you think that?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I feel like, yeah, well, the whole point of all of this is to do your own thing and your own journey, because that takes away the fun of it. It takes away everything, what's good about it.
Well, that's the kind of running for fame thing where you've been doing the circuit for 5 6 years and you built up a really good 20, or if you're really prolific, built up a really good hour show that, and then you get on television, do this and this and this and this and that, and you just need material. So people have got no scruples. They'll just, you would have thought that on this circuit they've got some kind of uh, uh, not dignity isn't the right word, but they understand why we're doing this. But a lot of people are. I think so. Again, when I started years ago, we couldn't believe we could make a living out of doing this. We had such good fun, and there was a load of really good characters. I think the nature of sometimes the youngsters coming on are seeing people make it very much quicker, and they're not ready. To my mind, a lot of the time they're just not ready. They haven't got the chops. Or they're ready for social media fame because they're very good at producing their little 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute little sketches. They're fantastic. But to be a stand-up, you've got to really tread the boards, as they say, and do it for years and years and years, and work out your character, work out your mannerisms, work out the jokes. I mean, it's a great journey, but it's people see stuff happening very quickly to people and think they want that as well. And you can't build up that kind of great material unless you are just innately something about you who are just geniuses in it, that have got something very special. There's very few of those.
The the thing that there was a thought that I had.
Yeah.
Let me think. Yeah, what's my thoughts on all of this? Yeah, the question of it is, how do you deal with that? Because I mean, we did have a chat before the podcast, and like things aren't all shine like the Rocky saying, like things are not like rainbow and roses or whatever. But the thing is, how do you deal with all of that crap? Because that goes on. How you go about doing it, but you got to prepare. What would be your advice on preparing for that kind of crap?
But preparing for stuff being stolen, preparing for fame, preparing for what? For
For from people trying to take things from you and like doing your own thing, if
well,
that happens.
there's been quite a few scuffles that I've seen that have happened over the years, but it's a tough one, isn't it? I don't know if you are ever prepared, because I think the nature of a lot of people who do comedy are very insecure and very sensitive people. They're on the kind of verges of society in the sense that they often can't really do much else. And so, the nature of why we do comedy, the people who we are sometimes can get very hurt very easily. So it's very hard. I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist to say, well, this is how you prepare for this, because I really don't know. You just got to take it as it comes. But um, I think generally you've got to just have faith in your creativity and do your thing and have your path, and don't worry about. And there's so much bitterness going on that even when I started, of who made it and why they made it, they had either got better management or they were lucky, right time, the right place. But I think the biggest thing why people make it is because they work fucking hard. I mean, they are the people who are constantly working, creating, and doing stuff. I mean, so we talk about Lee Mack or something like that. He's got a writing day. He wakes up and he goes, and he's got a person he writes with, but he goes into his shed, I think it is, and then he just writes for the whole day. In the olden days, I don't know if he might have relaxed a bit now, but I bet he hasn't. He just constantly works. Someone like Al Murray, someone like Harry Hill, they're constantly working and writing new shows and being creative, not worrying about what's going on around them, really. I don't think someone like Izar, whatever you think about him now, her now, is that when starting out, that they were just on this kind of path that it didn't really matter what was going on around them. I bet you there was some worriness and insecurities, really, but I just think they were so kind of, their mindset was so there that they were just, so don't worry about all that stuff if you're really into it. I mean, I was, in a way, I think I was for a while, a really good performer, and I still can perform really nicely and fun and have some great gigs, but I was quite lazy in my material, as in I would have a really strong 20 and do that around the world. I went all over the place. but I never thought, I thought, I just sat on the fact that I'm making a really nice living. I don't, I'm not sure about the fame thing. I don't think I would be great at the fame thing. I would crumble most probably because I find it quite hard. I think I would find it quite hard.
Without mentioning any names, I know that we spent before the podcast, like I spoke about, Dave Thompson said that a lot of comics or a lot of people that are successful, some of them, they can't cope with success. Have you seen any example? Don't say any names, but have you seen any examples of situations where you feel that comics who have achieved that sort of thing where it's really affected them and not in a good way?
um, no, not. I don't think I have really. I think there's different. I think there's different characters that go into it, and so I generally think that if you're a nice person and you get famous, you're still going to be that nice person. There's a few people who have become famous who aren't very nice people, but I've got a feeling that they weren't particularly nice anyway, however you define nice. But the fact is that have they been destroyed by it? I'm not sure. I mean, you hear the stories in rock and roll of drink and drugs and all this stuff that destroys it, but that I got a feeling that they might have gone that way anyway, in one sense. So I don't really mix around with really famous people. There's a few that I kind of friendly with, and the way it affects you is you could get recognized all the time. So people are trying so hard to become famous, and then when you become famous, trying so hard not to be recognized. So there's that kind of side to it. But that's just how your life can change. In that sense, I mean, I've got one of my best mates from school who I started. He's a disabled guy. He's not a comedian really, but we got into abnormally funny people. He's now on Gogglebox, and he is being it's really strange going out with him now because he's being recognized, but has dwarfism, so he's a small person, so he would always be pointed at anyway on the street because people would do that, and people are a bit crap at that kind of thing. But now he's being pointed at and recognized for being on television as that person. He actually quite likes it because at least he's not being, at least it's coming from a nice place now. So that's quite an interesting one of someone who's become famous. You're getting famous, much more recognizable, and he quite likes it. Anyway, yes, I don't think I quite answered your question, but I don't know enough to know whether it's kind of really mucked up people. Yeah, I mean, you can see it in the media, in rock and roll and all that. Rock and roll. I sound like an old geezer there, a bit of a boomer, but
That's a safe response. No, it's
yeah.
cool. No, but but you sort of dabble in and out of comedy because I noticed that you did a gig with Lollipops, and I know that you do a lot of photography and like you speak to like Mooch Michaels, who's like he's a very successful comedy promoter with Vauxhall, like in 5 years, what he's built, bloody hell.
Well, you should see what he's doing now. I mean, I mean, in all of those kind of people. I mean, he's kind of. It's not. I don't know if it's public yet, but so I'm not going to say it. But there's a massive, massive project that he's hopefully going to sort out. And you need those people on both sides. Don't you? You need people who are comedians, but you need promoters like that as well. Look at Hot Water. That kind of franchise. That not franchise, but that kind of what they've done. They were the first people who started kind of really recording what was going on stage and putting out on social media and made stars out of people who hadn't done television. You're talking about Paul Smith and people like that, that can sell out stadiums without having to go on Mock the Week or any of that stuff. So I think that the everything's that's what's really changing. Getting to understand how to promote stuff, PR stuff. And this is what Mooch is doing, I think, as well. He's trying to understand what he's, the kind of comedy club scene. Whereas Hot Water were very good at that. And in a way, someone like Top Secret have done really well. And sometimes you look at the Comedy Store, which was the comedy club, and is it falling behind slightly?
Yes, Yeah, that you might be right. Yeah,
I don't know if it is, but the fact is they
I
took a
don't
bit
know.
more time to be a bit more diverse with their bills. So like something like Top Secret understood the younger audience. I mean, maybe it's a slightly different audience as well, because Top Secret kind of go for the studenty audience that are in London, and they had a different financial proposition on how they let people, pound to get in or whatever like that. And he had the bar. I mean, the Comedy Store's got the bar, yeah, but it was a different kind of business model, I think, and it kind of, that's the newer way of doing it. Same with Hot Water, and you think, well, Comedy Store are kind of doing it now, but did they should have had the head start in a way, but um, don't know.
Did I spoke to the notorious, the very famous PJ.
I started out with PJ. PJ gave me loads of gigs in. I can't believe you were still as a youngster that PJ. How do you know PJ?
Well, I saw him at a couple of open mics, and he did one of my gigs, which was a heckler's gig.
Jeez.
And he tells me about different stories. Well, I don't want to say, but he talked about like the comedy cafe and all of these other sort of things. And like he's what he says that in terms of comedy clubs in London, there isn't really as many big sort of comedy focused venues as there are in perhaps New York or other places. And he mentioned with the comedy cafe that, well, I don't want to say too much what he said to me because it was, yeah. What was your thoughts on like the comedy cafe as a whole? Because that used to be a big,
That's why I
and
started. I started with people like Tim Vine and all those people at the Comedy Caf. It was brilliant. I mean, they were really good. I know that's why I think it's slightly changed. It was a great place, and upstairs you would have a little bar area where people like Joe Brand and people like that, and Kingston and Jimmy Carr would just hang out and meet after gigs. So that would be the meeting place. Um, if you were doing gigs around London, you'd end up at the Comedy Caf upstairs, getting smashed. I think it was much more what people think it was with the drink and drugs and all that stuff. I think it's very much cleaner now, which is fine. That's how things are. But there was a lot of goings on. Even the Comedy Store backstage. I mean, there was some stories that I won't say, but it was mad. It was funny, and it was anarchic, but even in that, there were people who understood their path in the comedy thing and just went for it, had their path, and that was all kind of part of it. But for a lot of us, we kind of hanker and hang on to those days, and they're gone. But that was a time and place that was fine, but the Comedy Cab was one of the, it was downstairs initially, when they moved upstairs later on, and then they closed down. But that was the place. It was brilliant, Rivington Street, and it was, that area was really kind of quite run down, and now it's kind of very hip, isn't it? That area. Used to get people from the offices in suits going there, all pissed up and coked out and all this stuff. And so it was quite a tough gig, but it was also, there was a lot of kind of friendships made there. I think a lot of the clubs, even like Jongleurs, that people slag off Jongleurs, it was a place where you would be away for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and see comedians you hadn't seen for 6 months or a year, and then go out for breakfast, go out for see films, do the gig in the evening, get slaughtered and all this stuff, and have a really good time. And there's a few of those clubs around where you spend more than one night at a club. There are some, but it's a different kind of circuit. Absolutely. What's it? But PJ was always a bit of a character, even when I was there. I didn't know that he's still kind of around. He used to hang out at Ball and Banana a bit as well, because he's from that area. But he used to run a lot of clubs in Croydon and places like that, and dodgy clubs as well. But fine, he was all right though. He was fair. He let you. And also in my time, this is where it's really changed, is that you wouldn't have open spot nights. You'd have one or two, maybe one at the King's Head or something like that. But it would be professional nights, like even PJ's one were professional comedians on, and in that you'd have an open spot. So the open spot will be at a professional night, And it's very hard for open spots now to come on for the open spot circuit to go on to a professional, because there's so many people doing it, and there's so many clubs just doing that, or bringers. I mean, we never had bringers. I mean, that was just bizarre. I mean, that just didn't exist.
There's a thought that I've had from it because you learn a lot when you play all those big clubs, all those difficult rooms, all these different things across the country. But if it's so hard to gain access to those gigs, does that hamper the comedian's ability to get better? Because you need those, because
Yeah,
it's so
because
hard to get those.
it can do. It can do. I think that there are clubs that there are, even the open spot nights are fine, because there are some punters in the audience. I think it's very hard when you end up at an open spot night and there's just open spots in the audience, and it's just you're playing. It's not the right audience, really. I mean, it's good to just get stage time and just mouth out what you want to say, so you don't mumble up your words and all that stuff. But ultimately, you need to play a club that has open spots there, but also a general public who are just normal people, because comedians are just very kind of in their heads, I think, a lot of the time. I don't know how competitive now. I mean, I'm not part of that circuit at all. So is there a lot of, is it hard? I don't know. You tell me.
It's 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 funny some of the stuff that I do see because I
Yeah.
mean I remember doing a few competitions here and there, and this is not to be funny or anything, but there is a lot of the ones that go through and that making the competitions, they're bloody good. But in some of the instances, I've seen where the comic completely stormed it very well. Like I've seen it quite a few times, and they didn't go through. And I've been looking at it, and they're like, this guy was but like miles better than everyone on the bill, and why have you not put him through? But obviously, they want people want to make money. It's about at the end of the day, people want power and they want success and they want to make money. And I think that plays a big part in it as well.
But always been slightly baffled by that. I mean, I've done some photography at some of these kind of competitions, like I think it was the English Comedian of the Year, not the British Comedian of the Year, because that's a different thing. I think there's a lot of pros in that. But the English Comedian of the Year, and I remember seeing the judges, and they're proper critics, the I mean, I don't have to name the names, but if I say, some big websites that were there, and some other people who were the judges, and I was looking at them, and again, I was saying the same as you, is that some of the people who absolutely stormed it didn't even get placed, and some of the people who kind of got placed, and I thought, I as a comedian and as a photographer, as a comedian watching it, I, comedy is subjective, but if you hear an audience really laughing,
Yeah,
that isn't subjective. That is objective. That they are en masse. So I think the powers, a lot of the powers that be, are not going on sometimes what is funny or laughter, but going on something else. I don't know what that is sometimes. But that's kind of the Edinburgh Festival as well, to some extent, is it allows people to do longer shows that don't have to be but funny, but could be interesting and have a narrative. But the problem is, I never really kind of did Edinburgh like that. But I think that the comedy circuit is stand-up comedy, and there are places for a different kind of comedy or narrative thing. But just by sheer volume of laughs, and you see someone doing that and then not even getting placed, you think there's a different kind of criteria going on, which I don't quite know. I'm out of that now. It's fine, but it's a tough one, because that could make you quite angry as a comedian. I think I don't understand that, but again, it doesn't matter in one way. You just carry on doing your stuff. But people, and I think that's why social media at the moment is so good,
yes,
because
yes,
if you're really funny and you've got something, although it's a different kind of medium and a technique, you can still do your work and have fun and make lots of money without having to worry about the powers that be, the old powers that be.
yeah. And is but you're now on different sides of the fence, and like things have changed now, and you're also getting into sort of social media yourself with the podcast, and what where where do you see yourself now? Because you are sort of, you dabble in and out of comedy, but you also do a lot of photography. Like,
Yeah, I
what
think
got you into that, and what where do you see yourself now going
okay,
into with
okay,
the
very
comedy
quickly
journey?
then, bit short, potted history. So yes, I was doing stand up, and then I had a little camera with me, and then in 2014 I bought out this little book, Comedy Snapshot, where I just the idea came from a few people. Bob Mills mentioned it to me and all this stuff. I was just taking a little snapshot of someone backstage that I was working with. And there's some really famous people in there, Joe Branley, Mac, Sarah Millican, all these people that I gig with. And I just done a little snapshot of them, and then I asked them for a joke and 4 or 5 facts about themselves that are not, you can't find in Wikipedia. But there's full of comedians like myself who weren't famous. But so I got like 450 comedians, and then with all a one-liner joke and 4 or 5 facts, Alan Davies, all those people. And so that came out, Comedy Snapshot. And then I did another one called Joker Face a couple of years later, which had got 500 comedians. There's about 1,000 comedians in these 2 little books, Comedy Snapshot and Joker Face. And that kind of, and then they weren't brilliant photography, but they were just little snapshots, and they weren't portraits, but they were portraits. They were very candid shots. So I wasn't trying to get proper lighting or all this stuff. They were just in the moment, which I really loved. And then that's when I started really, the photography took off, as in I really wanted to capture and document the comedy circuit that's my life. That's all I've ever done. And no one's done that before. They've done it for rock and roll. They've done it for theatre. You've got all the kind of Rolling Stone stuff and David Bailey from the time. And even now there's lots of rock documentation, documentation of photography, not in comedy, because photographers aren't allowed into that you just don't get access. And so because I've got access to all these, and I don't, front stage, fine, there's been a few of that, but very few backstage, because as a comedian, people like Harry Hill, who wrote the introduction to this fine art book that I did, Comedians, you just, I've got this little camera that I'm one of them, so they treat me as a comedian, not as a photographer. So, and I think I've developed a really good eye for the photography work side of things. So it's become quite arty as well. So I've got some really nice backstage shots, and also on stage shots where they kind of shot from the dressing room or shot from the side of the stage rather than front of stage. So that's really enthused and excited me for the last kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And so I'm still doing a bit of stand-up, but it's 99% photography and 1% comedy. And beforehand, it was 99% comedy, 1% photography. So it's really changed. And I think if I put as much effort and work into my stand-up as I've done to my photography, then I might be further up the line in the comedy world. But I think I'd be so enthused about this, because it really hasn't been done. It is a real great documentation of something that is ever changing, and it might not be the same in 10 years. You might not have that backstage proper live circuit that we've got. It might all it might be all AI by then.
That that is what some comics have said to me, in terms of, like, because there's still a lot of Zoom gigs going on.
Yeah, I think that you just can't, and I don't think AI or anything. You look at the ABBA thing. I haven't been to it, but it's meant, the hologram thing of ABBA. That is music that is done by not AI, but you know what I mean. It's that kind of feeling of it's live, but they're not there. And I still think people go there and think, wow, it's a great spectacle, but it's just not the same as seeing mistakes or real stuff going on in music and comedy. So I don't think AI or that stuff will ever, and the Zoom gigs are never as good. They're just, I think in magic you could do it. Zoom gigs, they're very good because you can play with the medium. But comedy, you just need that liveness about it. And I don't think I can't see it ever changing. That the enjoyment from live stuff compared to what, you must have, you're quite a comedy geek, aren't you, of watching,
Yeah, I'll probably
everything.
say so.
I met up with Mooch, as I said the other day, and there were 2 comedians there, young guys, who they're just naming names that I just haven't heard of, who are on Netflix, on specials, on YouTube, getting their stuff out there. And it's just, they were saying, talking about comedy, but it's always better to see it live, isn't it? I mean, there's no question, is there?
Oh yeah, definitely. I had maybe this isn't a nice. I had one thing from one comic who I I watched Louis C.K. and he was incredible live,
Yeah.
and I had one comic who they put a post up saying, "Oh, I'm doing a spot at the Comedy Store Gong Show, and I did badly at these two gigs I did," and then he mentioned, "I've seen clips of me doing comedy, and they've been just about as funny as Louis C.K." And then when I looked at that, I thought, "Are you bloody stupid or something?" Like it's a completely different thing. When you see someone up live, it's a completely different thing. Louis C.K. is incredible, and like when I saw you do, you can't compare it. It's a completely different thing. You have to be there and see how good they are. And then when I saw him do it, he didn't do very well. And I don't know, that offended me in some ways when someone said something like that. And that's
Do you get involved then? Because I'm very careful on social media because I think it is a bear pit, isn't it? I mean, I agree. I think seeing someone like, well, whatever you think of Louis C.K., and lots of people do think different things about him, but if you go back before what happened and you see some of his stuff, although I've never seen him live, but I've seen some of his specials. He's a brilliant stand-up. His kind of performance is brilliant. Whatever you think about the subject and all, the matter, but and then after that, blah blah. But it's very funny and interesting seeing new acts slag off, slag off people who have made their living and made a hugely famous from being just a stand-up, and then comparing it to themselves, kind of thing, whatever. I mean, I don't get involved in those kind of discussions on Facebook because I know it, or whatever on because what's the point? It can annoy you internally, and you think fine, but what's the point of getting into a debate
yeah.
about it?
No, I didn't get involved in a debate about it, but I saw it and like I spoke to this comic himself, and he's been going for quite a while as well. And he the thing that annoyed me, because when I saw him on stage, he didn't do too well. But the thing is, when I speak to a pro comic who's been going years or they're very good, if I ask them advice or I talk to them, like when I'm on the podcast, they can break things in quite a bit of detail and go into quite detail, and it can make a lot of logical sense.
Yeah.
When I went and asked him about something just to see if he knew what, he just gave me a load of bollocks. It didn't make any sense and wasn't like detailed or analytical.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't get involved in any of the debates, but I was, as you said, I got annoyed a bit internally because yeah.
But also, I think I think what you did was great. Actually talk to someone live, face to face, because you can get much better. Even through emails, the nuance of words can really, someone can read it in a completely different way of how you actually intended it. So I think usually when you're face to face with someone, and not even in an argument, just saying, what do you mean by that? I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain it to me? It's much better face to face than it is on any kind of other way of doing it. So that's good for you to do that. But yeah, and also Shafi Khorsandi wrote a really great piece. I think it was in the Guardian about this guy who he's allowed to make mistakes. He's allowed to say those things.
Yeah.
And I quite like. I don't think the idea of cancelling or
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think that whatever you think of the guy, he might not be a nice person in a way. But the fact is that you're allowed to say these things, and we're in a dangerous position where we're not even allowed to voice opinions that are not. You're allowed to, as a comedian, you're allowed to make these mistakes, and it's a shame that that's kind of getting curtailed maybe slightly.
What happened with Alfie Brown was bloody ridiculous. Did you know what happened there?
Yeah, I kind of
That
looked
was
at. I saw it.
ridiculous.
I don't know him, and I haven't seen his stuff. But yes, I take your point. People take things very much out of context, and that's where it all starts. Going wrong for the argument. But yeah, what happened? What do you think
Well, this will get me maybe in a bit of trouble to other people, but a lot of it's about intent. And I feel, look, he was trying stuff out and trying to be funny at the end of the day, and it didn't work. That was it. It's not. You have to try things out. You have
That's
to try
exactly
things
what
out.
yeah, exactly what Shafi was saying. I think that, I mean, I'm not relating it to Alpha, but it's kind of that is you're trying out stuff. The audience are going to, it's, and you said the right word. It's intent, isn't it? I always think it's intention. And if that person is a horrible, misogynistic, racist person, then that's where their intent is. But if you're not, and you're just trying to work out what is funny and where you go off on a tangent, where you take the audience and then pull them back, blah blah blah, and you're playing with words and material and ideas, and your intent is not to I'm not going to say offend, because not to be misogynist or racist, blah blah, or all the ists, then I think you should be allowed to say these things and make a mistake. It's all right. You don't jump on these people. And the problem is, I think in this day and age, we've created this thing where there's a lot of trigger words where you're not even actually listening to what's being said or where it's being taken, and you're just getting offended. And there's Steve Hughes, a brilliant comedian. I went to South Africa with him years ago, and he does that really brilliant routine on being offended. You're allowed to be offended. What's going to happen to you? You know, I was offended. I got leprosy because I was offended. You know, you're not going to get hurt. You might be offended, but you're not. It's not. You're allowed to be offended. That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Offended. He said, "I'm offended by boy bands." You know, and he does a great routine. Look him up, Steve Hughes. Brilliant. Really lovely thing on about being offended.
But yeah, no, it's your opinion. But why should you have the power just because you don't like something? Doesn't mean you should have the power to completely ruin someone like that.
Yeah. Do you think has he been ruined, or has he come out the other end?
I don't. It will affect him a little bit, but I think in a couple of months or a few months or so, he'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think.
People are too easily offended without really kind of listening what's going on, and they've got their agenda. They're in their bubble. You know, I mean, you look at Twitter, the Twitter feed, and you just think this. I mean, I get really angry with some of the politicians at the moment, the Conservatives, and you just think, what you're doing there. There is just so much double speak and horrible words and anger and all this stuff, and there's no debate, there's nothing going on that anyway. Yeah.
So with all the things you mentioned, have you heard of the person called Larry King?
In the States,
Yeah, that interviewer. Have you seen any of his stuff or?
I haven't seen his stuff, but you know, he's an oldish guy now, isn't he, Larry King?
Well, he's dead now, but I
Oh,
watched.
okay.
No, but
He's very old. Yeah.
but there was an interview with him, I think, on Mark Maron, and he's interviewed some bad people, dodgy people,
Right.
and when people ask him questions about it, when he interviews that person doesn't see themselves as a villain. They see it more as survival, or they're doing things that they think are right, not, but they don't see themselves as a villain a lot of the times when they do those things. How much, I mean, it's very difficult. If someone's being a dickhead to you or do something that hurts you or upsets you, you're going to see them as a prick. But how much would you say is some of the things that go on in comedy people need to, at the end of the day, people need to survive and they need to make money and they need to make the most of things. But how much of it is don't be an arsehole? What do you think's the balance of that? Because you've got to do what works and survives at the end of the day. But but what's the balance in terms of doing things in a right way? Or do you think that's a load of fallacy with some of the stuff that goes on?
Well, I think if you're a nice, good person, your moral compass is set right. And if you're, as we're talking about, you know, people getting famous who are arseholes to begin with, are going to be extra arseholes when they make it famous. So I think that people who strive and trample on people on the way up are those kind of people. You know, that you're not going to, you know, you have those people in all walks of life, whether it's comedy or in the office, politics and environment. So I don't think it's specific to comedians, whether you're not very nice person. It's just, I just think there's an added element to it, the fact that people go into comedy were a bit damaged anyway to start with. A lot of people who go into being a fireman or they're not necessarily as damaged sometimes as comedians to begin with. But there are all, I think morally, if you're a good person, then why would you be a wanker to someone who do you know what I mean? It's like it's just human nature of who you are that makes you that kind of person, surely.
Because the some of the some of the things that I've seen, like in terms of, I've seen a couple of other mics here and there. There'd be like two people in the audience, and I'll see like comedians trying to get money out of the promoter. Like when there's the person who's run the gig hasn't even made any money, and they made a big loss, or like that's. I've seen some instances where it's the other way, where I feel people are unrealistic in their expectations, and seeing that that person also needs to survive and do things well as well.
Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it is
That's what I was getting at.
yeah, okay. So it's its own little ecosystem, isn't it? Is that we have got a problem with the whole industry. I don't know if it's the same entertainment industry, but certainly with comedy, is that when I started, genres were paying 200 quid or £210 a night for doing a gig in Leeds, and they were paying for your hotel in a really nice hotel, the Radisson or whatever it was, the Queen's, wherever it was. They were paying for that, and you would do Thursday, Friday, sometimes two on a Saturday, and then you could do a gig in the Hi-Fi Club in Leeds in between. This was 20 odd years ago, and the money has gone down, it hasn't gone up. And the cost of living and inflation is so in today's day, that gig would be 500 quid, 400 quid, or something like that, double. But it's gone down. It's, first of all, don't exist, those clubs. And then that you might get 150 quid to a night or something like that. So the money's kind of gone down and everything else has gone up. But the nature of what people want, why they want to do comedy, is they want to earn the megabits right at the top. So people undercut each other, and clubs do the same as well. So, but also clubs sometimes can't afford to pay the act. So you've got some
Yeah.
clubs have got 2 or 3 people in the audience, 4 people, or it's a door split, or blah blah blah. But when I started, you had door split clubs, but they were professional clubs, and the audience would come in and pay, 5 or something like that to come in, and it was split. But you look at something like the model of Top Secret, where it's £1 to come in, and the guy is taking the bar, and in a way, some of those clubs should be paying the comedians more, but he knows, and other people know who run clubs, who are making a fortune, and a lot of clubs aren't making a fortune, but some of the clubs that are know that comedians would do it for whatever, because it's Top Secret. It is a club you want to play. So it's on their path. As I said before, when I was on the circuit, we were making a living by doing those clubs. People's expectations who come into the comedy now know that they can't make a living by doing those clubs. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. So the money's not going to go up because they're happy to do those gigs for 80 quid, 50 quid, 40 quid. And there's people who like me, who've been going for a long time, and see that, I can't afford to drive to Cardiff for 150 quid or 180 quid. I was getting 200 quid, 210 quid 20 years ago. Why? And they're not giving me a hotel now, and blah blah blah. And it just perpetuates this kind of thing where it's a race to the bottom, really, with the thought that so there is a clash between people who run gigs and comedians, because it just doesn't make sense financially for anybody at the moment, except for the ones who are making a huge amount of money on the clubs. Yeah.
And a lot of comics don't want to do anything with them because the big clubs have so much power.
Exciting, and they want to play those clubs, so they'll do it for free. And the fact is that some of these clubs will get in a famous person every so often to try out new material, and everything about it is exciting and all this stuff. And the new Jack Whitehall might turn up and just want to try out 10 minutes, and then you want to be associated with that, and it's all that kind of showbiz stuff. But it's not good if you want to try and earn a living out of doing the clubs. You just can't do it. And that's why that happened in America way before us. You know, you would expect to, you know, have a 3-drink minimum or whatever like that, or bring people into these places in New York, and the clubs would be making a fortune. And this is like Edinburgh in a way. Everybody's making a fortune except for the performers. And
it still seems to be the case now. When I went over there, it was it's a lot of nearly all the gigs were like that.
yeah,
And in their clubs, they're even more expensive, the ones here, because you have to get 2 drinks and a ticket. And
yeah,
to
no,
do,
totally. But they've had that model, and I thought we were exempt from that because there was a kind of a fairness about it, and also in the States, the stakes were much higher in the sense that if you made it in, you know, it was a stepping stone for a lot of comedians to get into films, and you know, you can make millions when you get into films, you know. But over here in the UK is that it was always regarded as a profession just to be a stand-up. I don't think that there was that kind of mentality in the States just to be. There were a few, but generally it was a stepping stone to get into films a lot of the time. Here it never was like that. We had a different kind of tradition, I think.
but there are a few of our comics that do get it into films, and you see
Oh yeah,
them a
they
little
do.
bit.
Oh, actually, they do now, and I think we've become much more Americanized in that side of things as well, of what it's about. But there was a real pure feeling of being a stand-up, and this is what you did, and it was quite sexy. And you know, if you went into a social setting, you know, with other people, and people found out you were stand-up, people go, fuck, you know, because and everybody's doing it now. You know, all these comedy courses, everybody wants to go doing stand-up. They see it everywhere, and I think the internet changed that, which is fine. You know, that's how people things evolve. But there's so much more stand-up now. And you know, when I was going, there's 4 channels on television, and you know, there's no streaming, and there was no internet as such, and you kind of booked your stuff by phone. It was, you know, it was kind of and it was a better it was a bet. You had to see stuff live, and the stuff you did at the Comedy Store, those people will be chosen to do some. Very few people get chosen to do the, you know, stuff on television because there was not that many platforms to do it. So it was a really different kind of circuit,
Mm.
and more interesting for other people to say, oh, "Wow, you're a stand-up." Now it's like so much around, isn't it?
It's yeah, it's funny that you said all these things because there's so many American comics coming here, and and
Yeah, we had that before. We had, I mean, there, you know, there were a few people who from America who realised that the comedy circuit in the UK at the time was actually more vibrant and more commercially a bit better for them because they were 10 years ahead of us on this kind of bringers and is stepping stone for film, and loads of people would make it. So they realised the UK circuit was a way to have a really good living. So there were quite a few Canadians and Americans coming over doing the circuit and stayed, you know.
I I spoke to an Indian comic, and I'm going to release the episode this Sunday.
Yeah.
He said in one of the biggest clubs in Mumbai, they have to pay £650 to have a film, a 20-minute set in that club. And that made a lot of famous people in India on TV and comedy and all that. But they have to pay £650 to do 20 minutes in that club to get a film set. And there's a big queue of people waiting to go in there. He said if he tried to get into that club now, he would have to wait months before he got in.
To have your set filmed.
Yeah, and to do a set there.
Oh, but you wouldn't have to pay 650 just to do a set. It'd be to
No,
do a
both,
set.
both.
Oh, really? That's fucked, isn't it? It's like,
Yes, yes. And he also told me that some guy who got arrested in India for making fun of Hinduism is now a famous Indian comic. And I said to him, "You're going to get a lot of our cancelled comics coming over to India then."
yeah, yeah. I mean,
It's dodgy all over.
yeah. But I do think, you know, all these people coming out and saying, I've been cancelled. I can't say what I want to. I mean, that you basically there's so many platforms where you can say what you want to say. You know, that kind of idea of being cancelled. I mean, I won't name names, but it does make me kind of think, well, hang on, you're saying it now. You're not being cancelled. You know, I think there was guys who went over on the Joe Rogan show and criticizing for being you're not being cancelled. You're using that. Maybe they are. I don't know. I don't particularly. I mean, I interviewed Arthur Smith and I talked to him about what was going on, and he really didn't want to get involved because your words will be taken out of context, and then suddenly you're the villain kind of thing, and I just think that ultimately you've got your path. Just be creative, enjoy what you're doing, and if you're good, then you will get an audience. I mean, it was Stuart Lee, I think, was saying all you need is 10,000 people who will buy a ticket, who love you. I mean, he's got considerably more people than that, and you can make a really good living out of your fan base, really. So don't worry about what's going on around you. Just create. I mean, people spend too much time arguing stuff rather than just writing stuff.
And that's where I'm at the moment, to be honest.
Is it?
That is effectively where I'm at the moment. Just focusing on my own thing, building my own thing, and just focusing and being good and making people laugh and building the audience. And elements I can control. The other stuff is I see them as, if I could play top secret, it's good to develop and see how your stuff ranks against other people and to learn and get better. But in terms of building whatever, I feel that being a master of controlling the things I can control. That's all I'm focused on at the moment.
That's true. I mean, you've got to do that. But there are problems within the whole circuit in the sense that there are little cliques and how do you get into to actually get the stage time. But that's where I think social media has taken off in the sense we'll just do it. I mean, I was talking to Rialino about it, and in our day you would have to go out and tread the boards, but you've got all these people who are producers, they film their stuff, they know how to cut stuff, they know how to edit, and they know how to do funny stuff as well. So you've got to start learning lots more bits around your craft, really. That's why, I mean, going into photography, I always thought, well, how I'm a stand-up comedian, that's what I am. But then I think, well, actually, it sounds very kind of arty-farty, but you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. You can be a creative, you can be a performer, you can do lots of different things. And I think, photography is an extension of your creative ability to see things. It was really weird getting into the photography world because I've never been critiqued by the art world. And I don't know what they think of my photography. And when I went into this gallery, and the first person, this guy Quentin at the Observatory Photography Gallery where my exhibition is, he was the first person in that world who said, you've really got something, you've got an eye for it. It's not because, and we kind of discussed what it was. And sometimes it's very hard to define. It's like with comedy, some people are innately funny and they understand timing without going on a comedy course. I never did any comedy courses. And yet I've got, I feel that I've got a funny bone, and other people I think have got funny bones. Think, well, they've got something. And the same with photography or the art world or anything else. What is it that makes someone better than someone else? There's something innately in there, which means you can teach people the technicalities of stand-up or the technicalities of photography, the camera, how shutter speed and aperture and all this stuff, and how timing is in comedy and how to write a joke. There's something, you've got to have something else, I think, as well. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
We'll be blah-de-blah-de all this out. No.
Yeah.
For anyone that's sort of listening now and they want to find out about you, and we spoke about it in an email, but if they want to find out about you and your projects, how do they find out about it and where do they go?
I think the best for me is my website, because then it spins off to all my other bits. But so stevebest.com, www.stevebest.com. And then, so I've got my kind of YouTube channel that's off on that, Steve Best Shoots, but I think that's the best base. Yeah, find out everything there. So I've got trying to do my sequel to my comedians book, my big art book, Comedians 2. So I'm putting the pictures together now. So that's all on there as well. Yeah.
Okay. Shall I do the rest of the episode in the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice?
Why is that what I sounded like just now?
Yes. No. No. Okay. Cool. So, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, you know where to find out about Steve Best. He's related to George Best.
And also Pete Best from the Beatles, the ex-Beatles. I've been brought on stage with both of those, George Best and Pete Best.
Oh, it's funny with bloody Pete Best, isn't it? He was in the band and they got rid of him because he got all the girls.
There was something going on actually.
Yeah,
I don't know for sure. I'm
yeah,
not a I don't know all the facts and figures, but there was something going on that he was a good-looking guy. Yeah, and
yeah.
I don't. I think it was an okay drum. I don't think it was a brilliant. But fancy that missing out on the Beatles. Bloody hell.
Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed Steve Best. You know where to go. Give this episode a 5-star review everywhere you see it. And most importantly, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.